I am laughing because I have had such a hard time recording this episode. I'm switching around and it's the first time. Okay. So I want to start out by telling you that I have been watching this show on Netflix called The Newsreader. It's an Australian show and it's set in the 1980s in a high pressure newsroom. They cover local news, they cover international news. It's crazy, it's claustrophobic, and there's lots of toxic, ego-driven characters. One of the newsreaders is this woman, Helen Norville. She's, I think, in her late 30s, maybe 40s, played by this played by this Australian actress named Anna Torf. She's excellent. And as a character, she's really charismatic, and she's great at her job, and the camera loves her, and her viewers love her. But within the studio, she's kind of a nightmare. And of course, it's a toxic environment. But she's also clearly troubled. And one of the storylines follows her through as she starts to figure this out. She's kind of a nightmare to the people around her when the cameras are off because she's completely falling apart inside. And as I've been watching this, I've been thinking two things. How hard my career was, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute, and how much like Helen I have been, even though I wasn't throwing things and screaming and having meltdowns and hiding, all that stuff was inside. And it's the third season now, and I don't want to be a spoiler, but spoiler alert, she does end up in front of a therapist, and the therapist said, "How long have you felt like this?" And there's just this moment, and she says, "My whole life." I'm Anne-Marie McQueen, journalist and proud 50-ish woman, and we are here looking for the true truth in perimenopause, menopause, midlife, and beyond.
Opening our minds to other possibilities is not always easy.
Hop, I think.
You're all woman to me. All right, Anne-Marie.
First off, I just wanted to tell you a couple of things. I'm about ready to launch the hot truth about hormone therapy. It's a video and PDF guide to the entire hormone therapy landscape. If you ask a medical doctor about hormone therapy, you ask a naturopathic doctor, ask a longevity specialist, you'll hear a different thing every time. You try to figure this stuff out on social media. It's impossible. I've spent 6 years researching. I've interviewed hundreds of people and have done 600 newsletters. I can see the whole landscape, and I've created a framework. And I've put together this guide, and it will be out very soon. So if you want to get on the waiting list for that, the link is in the show notes. And if you're not into hormone therapy, and a lot of the world isn't, I've also got a Fix It Fast perimenopause list. And it's 14 things. That mix of hot flashing, scientific evidence, human experience, and expert opinion, these are things that work for me. These are simple things that you can incorporate into your life. And I tell you what they are and why you can do them. It's free. I also have the link in the show notes for that. So those are two things that you may want to check out. Now, back to the episode. Okay. The newsreader and Helen Norville. Helen is someone, yes, who's been struggling her whole life, and she doesn't really know why. I don't want to ruin it for you, except that, wow, does it ever capture like the sort of show that never ends vibe of working in a daily news environment. Although I do want to point out, and you do see this in the show, that the print reporters are always first. We get the story, and then TV follows it. And often they gazump us with their awesome video that they get, but it shows it in the show quite well how they hear something on the radio and then they go and do the story, or they see it broken in the newspaper and then they follow it up. I think that part is really interesting. Anyway, I recognized Helen from early on because I didn't have, she's someone who actually spent time in a mental institution when she was a teenager. I never had that, and it was never that overt. My struggling was inside. I was a really sensitive kid, and I had some adverse childhood experiences, nothing crazy, but to me, I have genetic variations, and I'm sensitive to everything in the world. And I grew up with a belief that there was something wrong with me, a nervous system that was always on edge, an inner chaos and discomfort. And then, of all things, I chose to go into daily journalism. Not just like breaking news, one of the most stressful careers where people are the most unhappy. Remember when they used to put out those lists of people who are unhappy? If you've never worked in this world, it is so hard to explain what it's like. And I would tell the stories to my friends, but I just don't think anyone understands what it's like to have to leap out of your seat find something. We had no phones. We had to use maps. And then just, all of a sudden you're at a triple fatal fire. All of a sudden you're seeing a body pulled from the river. All of a sudden you're happening upon a murder scene and you're seeing blood everywhere that you weren't supposed to see, car crashes, air balloon accidents where kids died. And you're in the middle of grieving people. Sometimes they're in shock and they're just processing what happened. And there's no space for the emotion that you feel. Back then, it was a toxic environment. So no one would ever ask you how you felt or how you were dealing with it. Your friends working in the government, they're teachers, they have their own problem, but they don't know what you're going through. And just to give you an illustration of just one very early experience that stands out to me, I got a call that there was a transport truck in a car accident out in the country. So I hit the road in my Volkswagen Jetta with the sunroof, and I'm finding it with the maps on the passenger seat. And when I got there, what I saw was just like a beautiful day. Birds are chirping, the sun is shining, the sky is blue. I see one police officer. I know him. He's the comms guy. He's way off in the distance. There's a transport truck and there's a car, and it's really flat for a car. Like, I'm like, it doesn't seem like a full car. And I don't know what's going on. I don't remember, but I get out of the car and the cop yells like, watch your feet, watch where you're walking. And I look down and I've got sandals on and my bare toe is like centimeters from human flesh. There is a man all over the road. And I just remembered the cop and I, his name is Dave, like joking and laughing and crazy, like being like hyenas. Like, I don't know what we were doing. I gathered the information. I did my job. I don't even know that if anyone else arrived at all, because I don't know what I don't remember anyone else arriving, but they must have. And then I got in my car and drove back to the newsroom where I would write up the story along with probably 5 other things I was working on that day. A normal 12 or 13-hour day, making $18,000 a year. That's what happened back then when I was working in Southwestern Ontario. But as I was driving back in the car, I just was overtaken by emotion and I started screaming and crying and hitting the steering wheel and bawling and sobbing. And I just lost it. And I would have many more moments like that when I was that close to just absolute heartbreaking loss of life and devastation. So I never had tantrums in the newsroom. And I don't think I had a bad attitude. I was thought well of wherever I worked, well over moments. But I think anyone who had been with me, I was single a lot of that time and have been in my life. And I think you might have known that things weren't right if you just honed in on me. But I was living through it. So I would always try to find someone to drink with me on my nights off because I just couldn't bear to be alone with my feelings, particularly when I was doing a lot of work on the cop desk when I moved up to Ottawa. That's where things got really bad, really struggled. I would be driving around to work or assignments with just like cinder blocks on my chest. That's how it felt. And I would feel like I needed to be the best person all the time and do everything. I'd cry in the bathroom. I'd cry in my car. I'd wake up at night with my heart pounding. And the worst part was like, I was like, you're doing your dream job. You wanted to be a journalist. Like, what's wrong with you? Look at everyone else. Look how well they're coping. And I don't know if they were coping well or not. I've never talked to them. I would like to, but I was not early on in my career. But you have to do that stuff to get to the other part of journalism. That's the hard part. And I didn't realize that I already came into my career carrying trauma. And then I just layered more on top. And it was only recently that a neuroscientist friend had pointed out to me just how my career was traumatic in the early years. She said, you were seeing things that you weren't prepared to see and you had no one to support you. And she said, it's not that different from what police officers see. It's not that different from war. And that made me feel really good. And it made me start to realize and put pieces together because guys, I just struggled so much in those years. Like in addition to the stuff I told you about, like my brain would just have endless rumination over a subject and I would just like jump from one perceived hurt to another. I felt like I was at war with myself. Big highs, big lows. And I genuinely just thought like, this is who I am. There is something wrong with me. I was about 37 right before I moved to Abu Dhabi and was driving on a ski trip at night with a friend. And I think I was telling her something about dating or something that had happened to me. And I guess I sort of conveyed what I felt about myself. And she was kind of quiet. And then she said, how long have you been like this? And I don't know what I said, but I think what was true was what Helen Normal said my whole life. So it was a couple of years later in perimenopause that things really blew open. Like all that struggle I'd had before became almost too much to bear. And, I've talked a lot about what happened to me in perimenopause, but it's only in hindsight that I can see actually how bad it was and how how hard I was struggling, especially when I moved to Abu Dhabi, and made harder because I was here on my own. But this perimenopause situation forced me to start looking at everything. And I started to do a lot of self-help in the beginning, and then podcasts when podcasts became popular. I had 4 years of talk therapy, which was good, but wasn't. I just did so much searching. I started to be around more positive people and follow more positive people. And I started to realize that there were two people in my head, like a person who was experiencing things, and like a sort of a saboteur. And I started learning about intrusive thoughts and realizing that I had had them for years, but they had exploded in perimenopause. And in recent years, I've started to understand my nervous system and how the way I lived dealt with things and the role. And of course, for 6 years, I've been diving into everything that happens in this hormonal situation. But the long and the short of it is, I went through menopause about 2 years ago, and it's taken until very recently until I've calmed the F down. And I feel like I've been on a 15-year journey since perimenopause to sort of get myself together. And I don't think anyone would have known this if they'd seen me. It was inside. So that's why I really identified with Helen Norville for sure. The reason I'm sharing this is because this happens for a lot of people in perimenopause. It sort of reveals, like the recession of hormones reveals the stuff you've got to deal with. I call this the messy beach of perimenopause. The water is the tide going out, and the garbage on the beach is the stuff, the life stuff you've got to clean up. There's an emotional backlog, and there's patterns and the way we process life. And a lot of times this needs to change. And it's of eternal frustration to me that the physical symptoms of perimenopause, which are very real and very cumbersome and life altering, get all the attention. And this sort of like bigger stuff, this heroine's journey, this descent and rising that we need to do, gets so much less. So much less. Hormone therapy gets all the attention as this sort of fix that you must embark on. So anyway, all that to say, earlier this year, I had a company reach out to me, Wilson 4Q, and they liked what I was doing with Hot Flash Inc. and in the menopause space. And they like my style what I'm talking about, what I do. And the founder of that company, Janice Taylor, has come up with a program called Emotional Fitness. And as soon as I heard emotional fitness, I was like, oh my gosh, that's what I've been doing. That's what I've been learning. She's been doing it on the academic side, and she spent a lifetime putting her program together. It doesn't take 15 years. It takes like 6 months and then 6 months of maintenance. But, there's principles, and I'm going to have Janice on the podcast next week to talk all about it. But this is the first time that there's been anything remotely coaching or certification wise that's been interesting to me. And so I've been talking to Janice's company, and we've decided to partner together on a retreat. So we're having an actual in-person retreat at Menla Retreat and Dewa Spa, which is in Hudson Valley, New York, in June 3rd to 7th. I'm coming all the way from Abu Dhabi for this. I'm bringing along some of my very good friends, 2 members of the Hot Flash Inc. expert panel for sure, the vagina coach, Kim Botany, and Dr. Maria Luke, who is a menopause and joy coach, a trainer, an academic, a U.S. veteran, and has also been on the Drew Barrymore show. She works with Halle Berry at Reisman. So they were on the Drew Barrymore show. I almost fell off my chair. And both of these ladies I met early on in this recent wave of menopause awareness. They're very smart. They're very reasonable. They're awesome. So anyway, if you're listening to all this and you're thinking, there's just something about the way I process life that feels harder than it should be, just know that I see you and I know what you're feeling, and that there is a way to get emotionally fit that is, you can use a structure that is akin to physical fitness. And that when you get emotionally fit, your physical fitness will be better. I'm not making elaborate promises. I'm just saying that when you get physically fit, your emotional fitness picks up, and it goes both ways. It absolutely goes both ways, because that's what I've been doing for the last 15 years. And I am finally so much better physically. And you do hear this over and over. So if the retreat's not for you, that's okay, but take a look, because I would love to see you there. And tune in next week to hear from Janice Taylor about how she put this program together and what it involves and what it means and how you can engage. And I'm going to be talking. So I hope this wasn't too much. Always, this is not medical advice. This is for information purposes only. So I'm a journalist, not a doctor, and you should only make your medical decisions with your practitioner and your own sense of common sense and sovereignty. Thank you so much for tuning in and watching. Let me know in the comments what you think. Thank you so much for being here.